to Broadband Breakfast Live Online for Wednesday, October 6th, 2021. Obviously, there's always a little bit of a technical difficulty. I know that happens, but now I've turned those off. Well, I thought I had turned those off. There we go. Now I've turned it off. Thank you for joining us, and we will have more people join us, not only on our Zoom stream, but on our Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, as long as they're up and running, that is to say, streams. We are talking today about Wispapalooza. Really grateful that we have two expert operators and advocates for the wireless industry that will join us just now. Before introducing them, however, I just wanted to say welcome to those of you who are watching. We've had a very busy last couple of weeks because we were down at the Broadband Communities Conference in Houston for the Broadband Communities Summit, as well as Digital Infrastructure Investment, a 5-hour mini conference we hosted there. And were it not for the strong focus on fiber at the Broadband Communities Conference, I almost might be inclined to say, we may have to change our name to the Wireless Breakfast Club, because we're having so many folks from the wireless industry. And I know many of our regular viewers have said, hey, we need to get more people. And truth be told, we really do see the value in all forms of broadband connectivity. We're all about better broadband, better lives. And we want to make sure we get that higher capacity broadband out to more and more people. And that's why we are here today and every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time. These streams go live. They're streamed live on our website, broadbandbreakfast.com, as well as the social media channels I mentioned up top. So this stream will be available right away. So we just want to make sure that those who are watching through our Zoom channel and other channels recognize that there are other channels as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and change the view, open it up to all of our panelists. We're very happy to welcome here Claude Aiken. Claude is the CEO of the Wireless Industry Service Providers Association. And again, we're super excited that Claude can join us. You've been on many panels with us before, talking about the wireless industry and your approach to policy issues, as well as the broadband infrastructure package that we all thought would pass last week and did not for other reasons, which may or may not be part of what we talk about here today. But today we are here to talk about Wispapalooza, which is the very exciting conference of the wireless industry Service Providers Association in Las Vegas next week, beginning Monday through Thursday. Claude Aiken, CEO of WISPA, will tell us a little bit about that. We also have J.J. McGrath, who is the CEO, which he calls the Chief Everything Officer at TechWave, which is a wireless and sounds like a fiber provider in Texas and surrounding regions. So let's go ahead and turn it over to you, Claude. Tell us a little bit about what is Wispapalooza all about? How did you get that name anyway, Wispapalooza?
Well, I think going back to a time that predated me at WISPA, I think we had a bunch of music fans who were on the WISPA board and really liked Lollapalooza, and they were like, hey, Wispapalooza sounds pretty good too. It's a huge gathering of all of the kind of the small get it done broadband providers in the United States and actually around the world. In a normal non-COVID year, we would draw a pretty significant international crowd as well. But yeah, WISPA is the organization that represents small, entrepreneurial, innovative broadband providers in the United States and really around the world. Wireless is in our name, but we really are advocates of every tool in the toolkit to get the job done, to close the digital divide and provide competition everywhere. And that's kind of what our conference is about too. We have two a year. Wispapalooza is typically the larger one. A few thousand attendees, few hundred vendors on the exhibit hall floor, and really it's an opportunity for our community to get together, to learn from one another through a bunch of very hands-on, practical education sessions that run the gamut from technology, including wireless and fiber, to marketing, to regulatory, to HR. It's really geared towards ensuring that folks come away from the week with their head hurting, not because they stayed out too late, but there may be some of that, but really because you come away with so much information and so much knowledge, both from the sessions, from all of the cool gear that you see on the exhibit hall floor, and the connections that you make with other folks in the industry as well. That's one of the things that really drew me to this group of folks in the first place, is just their willingness to share information, to help each other out. Because at the end of the day, I think we all share the same goal, which is better connectivity for all. And that's the reason why we do this year after year.
Tell us a little bit about what the expectations are from a attendance and a vendor and a session perspective. It's interesting because, Claude, I was at WISP America in April in Dallas, and we were just emerging, we thought, from the pandemic, and so there was a lot of energy, excitement, and then there was a 2-month period of time when conferences were packed and they started to trail off. The Broadband Communities was probably at 60% of its normal attendance. What are you expecting, Claude, and what do you say to those who are maybe on the fence? Hey, should I go or should I not go to Wispapalooza?
Sure. So I think we had the fortune back in April of being on the downswing of COVID cases here in the U.S., and we had a bunch of protections in place at our spring conference. COVID kind of came back up again with the Delta variant, but thankfully it seems to have peaked and is dropping off yet again. We still have a number of protections in place for attendees, and we're trying to make folks as comfortable and safe as possible, while also providing a good event for all involved. It is an in-person event. We've tried to do some virtual stuff in the past. It just doesn't have the same value to all of the folks who in the ecosystem who want to be there. So in person seems to be the way to draw the most folks and to provide the most value to the community. But the way that the show is broken up, it's a little bit different from WISPA America, in that it's larger. It draws a broader profile. It's a little bit less technical, but there's still some technical education that goes on there. But we've changed up the format a little bit this year. We typically have a set of deep dive sessions on Monday before the conference officially opens that are focused on a variety of different topics. We have some really deep dive sessions on state and federal funding, because that seems to be the topic du jour. But as I mentioned previously, there's a lot of breadth and depth in a variety of different topics throughout the conference.
Well, I've got a lot of questions I want to ask and build on what you said, Claude, but I don't want to keep J.J., who's obviously agreed to be with us here. So J.J., let's turn it over to you in a second. As an actual live wireless internet service provider, what do you get out of going to Wispapalooza? What are you looking for this time around?
Sure. I mean, I've been going to Wispapalooza since 2012. As just an operator, and slowly I've up to the point now where I'm helping out with moderation, being a moderator, speaker on panels, helping out where I can. This is a great industry. I love the internet service industry. We're all there basically helping each other out, especially there's a lot of small providers. So a lot of us, we have to bond together, so to speak, to help each other out in times of needs, crisis, or ideas, and brainstorm and bounce ideas around. So it's a great opportunity. That's one thing I love about Wispapalooza, Wisp America, is that the sessions are great. Don't get me wrong. But it's the time out in the hallway, the time between the sessions. I'm going to bed at, I've done this before, 11 o'clock at night from going out and meeting with vendors. The next thing I know, there's a discussion at the bar and we'll go to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And it's all kinds of topics the whole time. And by the time I'm done Thursday, I'm just brain tired. My feet are tired. It's nonstop from pretty much 6, 7 in the morning to about 1 or 2 in the morning. You get out. Like anything, you get out what you put in. And to me, it's nothing but going there, meeting with the vendors, beating up on the vendors, all in good fun, of course. But talking to operators, learning what each of us are having challenges and how overcoming them. Hey, new ideas, new revenue streams. It's that just building that, those great personal relationships.
So talk a little bit about the vendor point you just made, JJ. And again, we like to break things down, make it very simple for our audience. So what is the difference between an operator, a wireless internet service provider like yourself, JJ, and a vendor? When you use that vendor word, what are you saying basically?
Well, I mean, there are some instances, because of this, our industry is still young in a lot of areas. Sometimes some operators are even vendors themselves because they have a new product or they have a new software system or something like that. But a lot of vendors, you go up there to meet with the vendors, like the manufacturing vendors themselves, like Cambium, Ubiquity, Mimosa, Telrad, Sales, a lot of those vendors that you can go see out there. You can also see, because our industry is more than just fixed wireless. I mean, we have fiber vendors that are there also. We have satellite providers that are there. I think DirecTV, is there, has been in the past. So it's great there to talk to the vendor reps, the manufacturing reps, talk to them like, hey, here's where I'm having a problem. Have you thought about this? Talk to me about your new products. So we're seeing new products that are potentially coming on market. So we're talking about that. Sometimes if we have a problem with the channel, we'll go over there and talk to our vendor about problems we're having. Then we'll go to the channel rep and beat them up, so to speak. But all the distributors, but it's all in good fun. So for the most part, and it's great to sit there and talk to them like, hey, I got to place an order for 1,000 units of this. What's the likelihood this is going to happen? So it's a great time to have those kinds of conversations. Or, hey, here's where I'm having a problem with this software. If I'm logging into your system and I'm trying to solve this issue for this client, here's where we're saying, I can't set like a VLAN tag or something like that. Can we work on this? And here's my use case. And so, there's lots of those kinds of conversations.
JJ, I love your title, the Chief Everything Officer at TechWave. Just tell us a little bit more about TechWave, where you are, who you serve, and what you're learning and progressing as you advance in your technologies.
Sure. I mean, right now, predominantly, we are a fixed wireless provider. So we are located in a town called Sherman, which is just north of a little town called Dallas here in Texas. So right before you get in the Oklahoma border, we serve predominantly Grayson County. Fixed wireless. We've been in business, like I said, for almost 9 years now. But we didn't really take this little internet business seriously until about 2015, when we realized, do we like it or not? And we were doing IT services. We actually started as an IT company, but we started doing private fixed wireless links in 2012, 2013. And then we started up our fixed wireless in 2013, but didn't take it serious, like I said, until 2015. And we are all in, and we love this thing. We've been growing leaps and bounds. But like I said already, that you have to constantly change your platform. And sometimes you have to say, well, we're doing fixed wireless, but now a new circumstance showed up, and now we have to do something different. So now we're working on getting into fiber to the home. We are a tentative awardee for the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund in our area. So we're working on potentially up to 5 counties worth of fiber. So that RDOF process has been a kind of a beating. But hopefully we just went through a technical review, had to fix some language. So we got that fixed up. So hopefully we'll be getting our RDOF, approval this month, better for worse. That's a different story. And then we're working on with our local council of governments through a public-private partnership. One of the many topics we'll be talking about at WISP America or Wispapalooza We went and did NTIA's broadband infrastructure program grant. So we're working on that. Not sure if we're going to win that or not, but that's all fiber to the home proposal there too. And then we're working on a couple other grants that we're eyeing to potentially doing. So we'll deliver whatever we need to, however we need to get our customers online to, truly go into our underserved areas. We are predominantly rural counties. So we're trying to put technology, internet, however we can to where the big boys aren't going to come in because there's just population density is just not there. So
you've raised a number of great issues there. I want to pull out a little bit more and get Claude's take on them. Let me identify three of them. The first one is how you are now doing fiber. Okay. And so here you are, a wireless internet service provider, and you're going to the Wireless Internet Service Provider Association conference, Wispapalooza, and you are talking about fiber. Okay. So now is that heresy or is that just natural progression? And I want to hear what Claude has to say about that too. The other two questions I'm going to ask are about programs like RDOF and other programs and whether those were a driver for that. And then I want to kind of come back to the P3 point that you just raised. But let's start with the fiber. What's motivating that?
You want me or Claude to answer?
Let's start with you, JJ, first, and then I want to hear Claude's reaction.
Well, so the question is what again? Since you said multiple questions.
Yeah, what drove you to say, hey, we want to actually do fiber to the home? Like,
sure. Okay, so one of the biggest things for me was when RDOF came up for all its census block groups came available. By analyzing those census block groups, to me it was the number one issue was a defensive play. If I didn't win those CBGs, I'd probably lose half my fixed wireless network, more than likely within 3 to 4 years. So to me, I had to do something. And I was at the position, finally, I wasn't able to participate in CAF 2 because I missed one filing window for 477.
And CAF 2, so everyone knows, the Connect America Fund round 2, I don't know, 15, 16, somewhere in there, 17. The point being that was really the first extensive reverse auction that the FCC has done to open up universal service funds to more competitive entrants like wireless providers. Okay, so you missed the CAF 2 deadline, you said, JJ, and so sorry to jump in there.
Continue. Oh, no, that's fine. No, that's fine, Drew. So then we were able to suddenly start building in because I saw that RDOF, one, it was a defensive play. Two, I needed to do something different because I figured what I was seeing was a lot of the grants, the language that was coming down at the federal level, state level. They were really wanting fiber. So I'm like, well, I've got to force myself into the fiber game, even though we're still doing fixed wireless and we're continuing going to do fixed wireless. As any provider is over the years, you realize in your area, well, what's the best technology to use? Yes, it could be fixed wireless. I know there's some operators that do satellite, they do cable, they do DSL still. And I think there's one or two of us that even still do, I don't, but modems. They're dial-up modems in some areas and very, very remote areas. So we do whatever we need to do to get service to our clients.
So Claude, how common is this among your members that they're kind of wireless or wireless only, and now they're really actively thinking about or rolling forward on fiber?
So I think it actually is fairly common. I mean, and that underscores a lot of us as a whole organization's public message is we need to allow for operators to use the right tool for the job, be it wireless, be it fiber, be it cable, what have you. We've had folks doing multiple technologies for a long time, and I think we kind of need to take a look at ourselves as an association and kind of move with our members where they're going. So we've had going back to Wispapalooza, we've had a Fiber Friday event for a number of years, just because that is a tool that the wireless folks have historically said, well, we're interested in learning more about this. We're interested in doing it. And so that's kind of carried forward. And now this year we're integrating that into the programming as a whole and having a wireless track as well as a fiber track, because again, given where public policy is and given where our folks are, it's becoming an increasingly more viable tool. And I think it's important to remember too that a lot of our folks are bootstrap companies. So they started with their own life savings, and it's really tough to get into the fiber game, buy all the equipment, do all of that stuff. It's a very capital intensive operation. So now that you see a lot of fixed wireless ISPs, having been in business for almost a decade, they've finally built up the kind of capital that's required to do some of the more expensive technologies as well. Which is not to say that wireless is going away. I don't believe it ever will. And we're seeing a huge resurgence or entry of fixed wireless into suburban and urban marketplaces too, as competition, where it may be, more cost effective to stand up an affordable competitor to some fiber providers in urban contexts. And we see folks deploying and taking market share in those contexts as well. So I think at the end of the day, to make a long answer long, it comes back to the right tool for the job. And we see ourselves as trying to educate our folks on all the tools that they may need to be to really close the digital divide and provide that kind of competition everywhere.
Yes. The old wars between fiber and wireless are, for the most part, subsiding, particularly at the operator level, where you see, J.J. kind of examples of what he's doing over and over again. And I'm certainly going to be interested to see how that plays out at Wispapalooza. I will be there Monday through Thursday next week. I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know. I've been to the last Wispapalooza you had in person 2 years ago. I've been to many before. In fact, going way back when I started working at Broadband, Illinois, the state broadband initiative entity, I did go to a WISP conference. I can't remember what it was called. It was in St. Louis, unusual place and time. But Claude, I distinctly recall the kind of, anti-government rhetoric to the roof, right? And I want to raise a new topic. I want both of your reactions. Let's start with you on this one, Claude, which is, where is the wireless industry, the wireless internet service provider industry, on this notion of support for or resistance to government funding for broadband projects? Obviously, the landscape is different now from a year ago, different now from 10 years ago. I'm just wondering if you could speak to that and speak to the role that CAF 2, the Connect America Fund 2, the RDOF, or the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, and new programs that have just been passed or will be passed this year. What are those doing to the base of members of WISPA as you approach government funding for broadband?
Sure. So I think, again, it helps to provide the historical context too, right? So WISPs historically were completely shut out of every single government funding program ever. So to the extent you were talking about government funding, you were talking about a potential competitor to your small business that you had poured your life savings into, getting money to compete with the good service that you were providing in your community. So I think that sort of sensibility underlies the point that you made, that a lot of folks were a little bit, we're not big fans of government funding historically. I think to some extent that is a continued theme. I mean, look, we've got a bunch of independent entrepreneurs who have a great idea of how they're going to serve their community, and they just want to do it how they want to do it. But with the advent, as JJ was saying, of the CAF 2 reverse auction at the FCC, that was really the first time ever that this segment of the industry was allowed to participate in this. And you saw a number of folks walk away with massive obligations to build, but also significant amounts of funding to meet those obligations. And those folks who won are actively building, they're meeting their milestones. The first company to finish their CAF 2 build in their entirety within a year was a WISP. So this is a community that can leverage those kind of tools to do pretty amazing things, be it fiber, be it wireless. It's a group of folks who's just going to get it done. So that sentiment, though, seems to be evolving, and I think JJ is kind of emblematic of that. Folks who had historically just been like, how do I get the job done? Government is not part of the solution. And now that government is willing to work with this industry segment a little bit more, there is certainly a willingness to reciprocate.
So JJ, yeah, what is your perspective on that? And this could be a lead into the public-private partnership angle as well. But just from the CAF and RDOF and other funding perspective, where do you see WISPs? How do you see them benefiting or not, or being harmed by these programs, JJ?
Oh, it's kind of a lot from an operator's perspective. It's kind of a loaded question, so to speak. I mean, you do have your operators, Claude alluded, that says completely anti-government. Hey, stay in your own lane. Let me do my thing over here and let me grind and grow. I get that attitude. I get that sentiment and that stance. The other side is where I'm more at right now is that for me to grow and to get the serious amount of the funding I need to go after to deploy more and have more coverage and offer more speeds and offer more benefits and connectivity, I have to have government money to do that. So, but you have to be in the mindset to change, to have that paradigm shift to go that it's not just applying for the government funding. It's not as simple as that. I mean, a lot of this stuff, one of the reasons why I did RDOF again was that it forced me to have audited financials. It forced me to be eligible telecommunications carrier status, ETC status. So by having that now, that eliminates multiple barriers. But some of a lot of smaller operators, just those are astronomically large barriers to get around sometimes for some of these people. I mean, you're talking financial audits could be $50,000 to $100,000, and it's going to have to be every year. So have that kind of commitment. You have to have that mindset. It's like, I've got to do this every single year, and I've got to learn to play the game. And I hate calling it a game, but it really is a game. It's like, what does the federal government want? And now let me try to, do I have it in me to go after it and go after the government money? But once you do it, and once you eliminate these barriers, then the playing field opens up a whole lot more for you. But then you could starting to get yelled at by the smaller players, like, hey, why are you taking government money? You shouldn't be doing this, and you're going to be overbuilding me. I'm like, well, you better be part of the game, because here's a lot of money coming down the pike. So it's kind of a loaded question, though.
Claude, how has it worked? What's the best case scenario for how this works, and maybe also the worst case scenario too?
Yeah, and I think I'll piggyback off of JJ there. I mean, you've got to also remember that this particular community, our largest membership tier is folks who have 250 subscribers or fewer, and these are tiny companies. And when you're talking things like audited financials, ETC designation, I mean, you could ostensibly eat up half of their entire revenue from providing service, doing those kind of things to go after the kind of government funding. So I think that's another relevant point to make. It's not that folks are saying necessarily, I hate the idea of government money, although there is certainly that aspect there. It's that they see the deck stacked against them in a way that it's insurmountable to be even able to play in the first place. So yeah, it can certainly be a challenge for a lot of these smaller operators who are in a tiny rural community, and they're serving that community, and that's all they want to do. But you see other players being funded to provide service in there, and that can certainly be a challenge, especially again from the context you've put your life savings into this, and you see your own government ostensibly hurting your business with your taxpayer dollars, and I think that's kind of the context where some of these folks are coming from.
Well, that may be the context for some, but there are clearly others who really made a big effort in CAF 2 and in RDOF 1. So just speak a minute or two about that. How has that worked for those larger members and those that are smaller that might get larger?
Sure. So it's interesting to kind of think back to CAF 2, because there there does seem to be, especially within the DC policy space, a certain level of discomfort with something new. And so when CAF 2 happened, there was a lot of hand wringing about, oh my goodness, like who are all these WISPs who have won all this money? They say they can provide service at 100 by 20. Like, we don't see how that's possible at all. And back then, back in 2018, I cautioned, like, well, let's give these folks a chance. Like, these are folks who are get it done operators. And you look at what some of these companies have done with that funding. Like I mentioned, Blue Surf was the first company to finish their build, 5 years ahead of schedule. They got it done. You see companies like Whisper, who are not only now providing 100 by 20 service, but are in some of their CAF areas are providing 400 by 100 service. And exceeding expectations and going above and beyond to serve their community. And that's kind of the underlying ethos that I think a lot of our members bring to the game here. And I think that's why there's certainly some concern when you see pushes towards fiber only, pushes towards, well, we've got to have symmetrical gigabit, because that's going to really be future proof. You look at some of the examples of folks who have committed to providing a certain standard of service and now are exceeding that, not because they're obligated to, but because they believe it's the best thing for their community. And from our perspective, you just don't want to shut those folks out of participating, because they're the folks who are actually going to be able to make the business case to do this in the long run, when all the funding's run out, and when Congress has said we're done, the FCC, we're done. Those are the folks who are going to continue to provide that kind of high quality service in those communities.
Well, and the thing that just always comes back is the entrepreneurialism, right? The willingness to get out there and just do it. I mean, that's something that's so admirable, significant about what the role that your members play in the broadband ecosystem. They don't wait for permission. Again, I interacted with so many of your members firsthand in Illinois when I was at the Partnership of Illinois. They would just do the things that no one else would do, get the towers on the grain elevators and the church steeples and just make it work when there was no broadband. And yes, maybe we are moving to a more kind of advanced phase. People are definitely fed up with 25.3, right? And whether we kind of all get to 100 or 120, 100 megabits down, 20 megabits up, or 100 megabits down, 100 up. Those are kind of interesting questions we're still working through. And I don't want to close this topic completely, but I do want to open the door to the next topic I raised just a moment ago that JJ highlighted, which is public-private partnerships. And JJ, I know you're going to be moderating a panel on that at Wispapalooza, and we want to come back to some of the other things that will be discussed, Claude, at the conference as a whole. But on this point, public-private partnerships, let's talk about that. What's the model? What's the template here, JJ? You referenced the broadband infrastructure grant process, and you said you put in an application for that. Is that correct? You have to work with the local government to do that. So talk a little about what you're hoping to achieve, and then maybe, Claude, again, you can broaden that out to how you see other members playing a role in this.
So possibly the reason why we're doing a PPP is ultimately we're forced to. I mean, flat out. I mean, a lot of the legislation that we're seeing now is trying to have accountability of partners, not on the for-profit center, the broadband providers themselves, but also on the nonprofit or the agencies that, again, this is kind of COVID kind of exposed a lot of cracks and crevices in the industry, broadband industry itself. And so this is their way of trying to hold everyone accountable. Well, okay, broadband provider, you want to provide internet in this area, but we want to make sure that you do what you say you're going to do. So we will need you to focus and partner up with a state agency or a political subdivision. Now, it could be at the state, it could be your council of government, your county, your city. There's all kinds of anchor institutions. And I think there's a couple other things that you can and cannot do with that. Each state is slightly different. So you just need to look up in your state what a political subdivision entails. But it's a way to kind of partner up together. Typically, the political subdivision state is the lead applicant with a provider underneath it, and then y'all apply for whatever the grant. In our case, it was for NTIA. And there's 3 programs going in right now, and they all pretty much have a public-private partnership. Now, a lot of them they want a public-private partnership, but Drew, they want most likely maybe a letter of commitment, not a really legal PPP set up. So you got to be mindful that, so they may say a PPP, but in reality, they just want a letter of commitment. I do. Maybe have at least an agreement if you are audited, which you will be, because it's over $75,000, I think is that the limit. But so yeah, we went to our local council of governments. They were open to it. They said, let's do it. We need to do something in our county for broadband. So let's do it. And then we put an application in. Now we're just in a holding pattern for that. But we're seeing a lot more applications. EDA has several grants out there right now, similar. Everything we're seeing right now is everyone has to have a PPP. So
and EDA refers to the Economic Development Administration. Is that correct, JJ?
correct.
My acronyms correct. I mean, there's a lot to absorb, even for those of us who are steeped in this field. At Broadband Breakfast, we post multiple stories every day about broadband policy, internet technology. I'm also counsel at the CommLaw Group. I work with many broadband providers, including many WISPs, and just even myself keeping track of this is not easy. And I can just imagine how hard it is for someone who's busy actually providing internet service to keep track of this. And so maybe that's a good lead into Claude. What can WISPA do to help? And what is your take on this kind of emerging notion of the public-private partnership for WISPs?
Sure. So I think it's an interesting concept, and we've been trying to do some educational efforts with our membership about what this looks like. How do you go about participating in public-private partnerships? But a challenge there, as JJ kind of alluded to, is everything is different. The way that a few counties in Texas do it may be very different from the way that Washington State is going to do it, or that Illinois is going to do it. And so that localizes things a lot more than we're used to for folks who are steeped in federal policy. It means that you're going to have to really understand how your locality, how your community is going to be going after this. And it kind of is a mixed bag, right? Because it means that it's not going to be consistent across the United States. There's going to be kind of that aspect of states and communities as laboratories of democracy. So you're going to see a lot of different approaches to this. But then as far as how our members are going to be able to engage, bandwidth to do this, kind of as you mentioned, Drew, is always a concern, because these are folks who are very focused on connecting their community, and then to say, okay, well, you have to take time out from installing customers and go meet with your county government to make sure that they know you're there, you're engaged, you want to do more. That means you're installing fewer customers for some of these folks who are just a few people who are in the business. But at the end of the day, look, these are community-based providers, and there has been, as you mentioned, Drew, a lot of them will be up on the town water tower. So there is already a partnership with the community in that respect, partnering with the farmers to put up radios on the grain legs. So there is already that ethos and that level of community engagement. The challenge becomes, how do you navigate the halls of local and state government for entities that may not be used to doing something like that? And that's going to be, and again, then taking time out of actually connecting customers to go do that, to ensure that your business remains viable, to ensure that you are able to spend the resources continuing to connect customers. That can certainly be seen as creating some headwinds as well.
Well, We may come back to money and broadband money from the federal government, but let's talk about other issues too. There's clearly lots of other issues from a policy. We haven't even touched on spectrum issues, right? The wireless frequencies, Claude. So what's on your mind as the CEO of WISPA, and what's on the minds of your members right now as we seem to be coming out of COVID, at least hesitantly? What are their big issues and questions, and what do you expect to be the hot topics discussed at Wispapalooza next week, Claude?
Sure. So I think, as you mentioned, spectrum policy is going to continue to be a big one. I mean, the FCC just kicked off the 3.45 gigahertz auction yesterday. I think it's instructive to look at the number and type of bidders in that auction. You will see 0 smaller providers, just because of the way the auction was set up, being auctioned at partial economic areas as opposed to smaller geographic areas that would allow entrepreneurs and innovators to compete, like you saw with the CBRS auction. So I think there continues to be a challenge at the federal level to educate policymakers in designing spectrum policy in a way that takes into account these folks who are actually on the ground getting it done, as opposed to folks who may be interested in speculating on spectrum as a financial asset, as opposed to something that they're going to be using to actually deploy broadband in the community. So we earlier this year laid out what we call our path to gigabit policy framework, which addresses a lot of different stuff, including spectrum policy, including infrastructure, including subsidies, and including digital literacy and adoption. We really put our heads together internally to try to come up with what we thought was a holistic solution to really putting the United States as a whole on a path to really high quality, ubiquitous, competitive broadband. So would encourage folks to visit our website and take a look at that, because that I could go into detail, but then we would use up all of our time, and I want to be respectful of all of our listeners' time.
Well,
here.
and we'll put a link to that. We already have a link to the Wispapalooza site, and registration should be available there. And we'll definitely put a link to this too. We have a question here from Matt Larson. And I think it's well worth us tackling. ISPs are already dealing with issues in the supply chain, rapidly increasing costs for raw materials, and a labor shortage. Would anyone like to comment on how too much money coming into the industry is going to distort the market? J.J., let's hear from you. From Claude.
Oh, it's going to 100% exasperate the market and make it even worse. I mean, it's going to be nothing but toilet paper shortage again. I mean, it's just going to make it worse, especially as all this RDOF. I mean, we're already right now maybe a year plus on fiber, and once they start releasing all this RDOF and they start releasing all these NTIA applications and give approvals, it's just going to make it worse. I mean, we're at the point now where we need to figure out how much fiber we want to probably run next year, if not 2 years, and go ahead and place the order now. So now I have to figure out where I'm going to additional funding right now to get all this thing coming in. But it's the same thing of, we're starting to have issues that we're seeing from the boats and sitting out off the shores, off the coastline right now, and just getting backlogged. And so it's going to affect us even on the wireless. I mean, it's going to affect everything altogether. But so, yeah, it's just going to make it, because of all this money, hundreds of billions of dollars potentially coming from broadband, it's just going to make material issues, even worse. And so it's a cycle that's going to eat itself and eat itself and eat itself.
Well, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I think it's absolutely going to be a frustrating challenge for the industry as a whole. And what it's going to do is, one, it's going to make all this money not go as far as it otherwise would, because of the labor shortage and because of supply chain issues. You're going to have to pay more. And then I think it's challenging, because what we're seeing now is the administration is focused almost solely on wired solutions. They're focused on fiber. If you have a fixed wireless deployment, per the White House fact sheets on infrastructure, you don't have infrastructure there. So I think that,
I mean, those were the fact sheets in March, but I don't think those have ever been reduced to writing, so to speak. I mean, the bill that has passed one chamber, the Senate, but not the House, does not have those restrictions unless you've kind of point.
yeah, no. So I guess one of the things is the Treasury guidance for their COVID relief funds doesn't count an area served unless it has a 25/3 wired connection. So no matter if you're offering 400 by 100 over fixed wireless, that area is per Treasury guidelines is considered unserved. So I think that kind of a challenge that we're talking about there means that we're leaving viable solutions off the table, and it's only going to make things worse. The Americans who are unserved or underserved now are going to be unserved or underserved a couple of years from now if we continue down this path that doesn't acknowledge our other solutions in the ecosystem as well. So those are kind of the challenges that I see as it relates to supply chain. It's going to make the money go not as far as it otherwise would have, and you're then leaving other solutions off the table that are going to mean that Americans are not served as quickly and are going to be served with not as affordable options for connectivity. So it's going to be a wild next couple of years in the broadband space for sure.
Well, and the point JJ just highlighted is that, we need to be thinking really in the long term, because, the last time there was a major subsidy for broadband in the Obama-Biden administration, it was the emphasis was get it out and get it out now, kind of, and it's almost like maybe you're just feeling a slow walk, right? I mean, maybe this is what Congress is doing. I mean, there's this bill that everyone expects to pass, but it hasn't passed. It's caught up in a broader political crossfire between not only Republicans and Democrats, between Democrats and Democrats, and so there. No one, I guess, can plan on that yet. So I don't know where the question goes from here, but JJ, do you have any thoughts on, I mean, would you say that these public-private partnership discussions you've started are really being forced on you, so to speak, by the administration policy? Would you be doing this were it not for the funds that are available through these programs that require you working with a government or nonprofit, JJ?
I think for the most part, we're basically kind of being forced into these public-private partnerships. I mean, great, there's opportunities where the partnerships is a willing partnership. So don't get me wrong, there's great opportunities, great examples out there. Ours is very willing. There was just a lot of, because they're being forced to do this also, this is their first foray into broadband and having to deal with this. And they're thinking, well, all the stuff they've been dealing with, and now they're into the broadband world, and they're like, wait a minute, we don't own this, or you own this, and we're just going to give this to you. And we're like, well, yeah, this is how the industry works, or these are how the grants are supposed to. So there's an education probably that's going to have to happen, and it's going to take time to do this. And so the education on how the broadband industry works, if you have a partner who doesn't understand the industry, understand the history of the industry, and understand what it takes. And I just want to also mention, Drew, that there is, when it comes to supply issues real quick, it's like the NTIA does say in the notice of funding opportunities, the NOFO, that they understand there's going to be a supply issue. So they are willing, while there's a 1-year installation, so to speak, they know, like, look, if you need to add an extension, just go ahead and do it within 90 days and they'll extend the time period. So I think the government does understand there's a supply and demand issue, and they are very accommodating to that. So I just want to make sure I mention that too. But
certainly want to hear any further thoughts on some of the policy issues, and I want to raise the whole issue of rip and replace. Does that have any impact on the, or what is the impact on the wireless industry, and any other policy or kind of commercial issues that you expect you're focused on as we go into Wispapalooza next week, Claude?
Sure. I think the pending infrastructure bill is probably the biggest policy item that folks are going to be talking about. That level of money injected into the space is definitely worth the conversation. But then also conversations about all of this, the money that's already out there and how it's being used. Those are going to be absolutely topics of conversation on the policy side. Again, in addition to some of the other more nuts and bolts stuff that we do at the conference, it's great to see sessions that are basically like, how do you start an ISP?
Yeah.
We have that every single show, and you have 30 or 40 people in the room who are just starting out or have had a business for a year or two. I have not seen that anywhere else in the broadband space. This is where the entrepreneurs are at, and the get it done folks are at. As it relates to rip and replace, that it actually isn't a huge issue for our folks. There really isn't a whole lot of Huawei or ZTE gear deployed, but in WISP networks, it seems to be more of an issue for the small rural cellular providers or the rural telcos. But the kind of equipment that WISPs have historically used, and not to say there are a couple folks in our membership who are impacted by that, but it isn't as big of an issue for us as it is for some of the other rural constituencies.
What you mentioned this, how to start a WISP. That is a great topic. What other sort of non-policy topics or policy topics we haven't touched upon are you expecting, or what is the show floor going to be like, Claude? And what's your attendance expectations? Are you expecting as good as?
Sure. I mean,
close to?
I would love to see us break a couple thousand. We may be a little bit shy of that. It just depends on how many folks are registered at the door. At WISP America, we had several hundred folks show up just at the door and be like, "Oh, I would like to buy a ticket." So that was really interesting. Depends on how many folks decide to do that in Vegas as well. We've got some very interesting technical sessions as well, like where gigabit fixed wireless meets fiber to the home is a session that I think we'll see a lot of interest in. There are plenty of regulatory sessions on rules you have to comply with when you're starting out. How do you infrastructure? Like what are the rules around deploying infrastructure? And then we've got a couple of great keynotes as well. We've got some great folks from the finance industry who are going to give folks a tutorial on how you go. It's kind of a beyond bootstrapping. How do you access financing outside of government funding and outside of reinvesting in your own business, which is a great one. And then on the back end, we've got another great session that really excited about from our one of our members, Visionary Broadband out in Wyoming, on how they managed to spend tens of millions of dollars in 77 days in order to comply with a CARES Act deadline. So just kind of a masterclass in how you if you are successful in government funding, how you go about quickly building a network to comply with any deadlines you may be facing on utilization of those funds. So a lot of interesting stuff out there that I'm really excited about.
Great. And like I said, we've got a link to the agenda. We'll make sure you have a link to registration. What are you looking for out of the show, JJ? What are you hoping to get from it, and what do you kind of offer up to others who are considering going? They should get out of it.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, part of my big draws of these shows is spending time out in the hallways, the exhibit floor, talking to vendors, talking to operators. I really enjoy that. That's my best part. And I do like. I'm hosting, I'm moderating a couple panels on a panelist on a couple other sessions, and then, going in and out on some of the sessions. A lot of the sessions are there just to help spur the thoughts, and that's what I like about this. And like, oh yeah, buy that. I meant to ask that. And how do you do this? And then going up there and talking to the panelists. So that's great to, it's just the friendships and continue there to build those on those, meet new people, and just have a great time.
Claude, any final thoughts you have about the show, the industry, and what you were encouraging people to come and see at Wispapalooza?
Sure. I think it's really exciting to be back together in person.
And sorry, this is all in person, correct? There's no virtual.
It is.
There's no
It's
virtual event.
all in person. There's no virtual component. We tried that with WISP America, and it didn't. The uptake wasn't very significant. So we decided not to do that for this show. So it is all in person. You'll have to make a trip to the beautiful Paris Hotel in Las Vegas if you want to be part of this. But yeah, I think it's going to be great to see everybody again. It's always valuable for me to hear in person the stories of how operators have been doing during the pandemic, the incredible stories that they're telling me about the fantastic things they're doing in their community, how they're growing, how they're meeting marketplace demands. It's just a fantastic time. Very excited to see. One of the cool things is also a lot of our vendors and manufacturers will do new product rollouts. So I'm excited to see all the new gear that folks are rolling out to be able to provide better connectivity. So it's just an exciting time, and excited to be able to do the first one of these since 2019.
Well, Chris Utesh has a question. Any advice for first-time attendees to Wispapalooza? Let's let each of you answer that in 30 seconds, and then we'll call it a day. So, JJ, what are your thoughts on that?
Wear comfortable shoes. Make sure you always have something to drink from all the talking that you're going to do. Take copious amounts of notes. I mean, when I first went to Wispapalooza, I think I filled up half of a legal binder or legal pad, and I was just taking notes. So you're going to be asked a lot of questions. It may be a dumb question, but ask the question anyway. People are there. I love this industry. They're willing to help you. They want to see you succeed. There's really no competitors there, so to speak. They want to help you. You can be neighbors, and they want to help you. So, like I said, wear comfortable shoes. Bring a light jacket. It may be a little cool in there. Gotta keep everyone awake.
Great thoughts, Claude. Final thoughts for
yeah, no, I would echo what JJ said. Try to plan out what you're trying to do ahead of time. I mean, there are a lot of panels to pick from, so having a game plan ahead of time really will help you focus on what you think you need to really hit hard to really get the most out of the show. Yeah, absolutely wear the comfortable shoes, hydrate, and then just come prepared to have a good time and to be open to meeting new folks and starting some new lifelong friendships. Because that's what I hear is a lot of people are. One of the cool things that I've heard is there will be groups of WISPs that continue to get together on a yearly basis based on the relationships that they've formed at our shows. And that's really, really cool to see.
Well, wonderful. Thank you very much for being here with us. As I said at the top, I will be there all week. I'm looking forward to it, to learning new things and hearing what's on the minds of wireless internet service providers, whatever technology they may be using, and very excited to be out and meeting people as has happened already this year. So it's great to continue that. Get vaccinated, obviously. Those are important things to do, and then don't hole up in a room for the rest of your life. So on behalf of J.J. McGrath, CEO of WISP TechWave, and Claude Aiken, CEO of the Wireless Internet Service Provider Association, I'm Drew Clark with Broadband Breakfast and of Counsel with CommLaw Group. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern.